Hey, welcome to this podcast where the truth is released to inspire you to find your voice, bring out the gold within you, and help you reach your full potential to roar out loud in the world around you. I'm your host, Mary Street, and I'm here to take you on a weekly journey of hope, inspiration, and empowerment. This podcast is where we believe in turning up the volume on life's practical tips, impart insightful wisdom, as well as share life stories of triumph, resilience, and passion. In each episode, we'll be diving deep into relevant topics in today's world, as well as into the incredible lives and stories of extraordinary everyday individuals like you and me who have been set free from the fears, lies, and have overcome great adversity and found their voice to release their roar. So whether you're tuning in during your morning drive, working out at the gym, getting ready for school, or cozying up with that good cup of coffee, get ready to amplify your life and ignite your courage. This is Roar Out Loud. Hello. Welcome to this episode of the Roar Out Loud podcast. I'm super excited to be here with you. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about spiritual parents and what it's like to be a spiritual parent in today's world and how relevant it is to be a spiritual parent and what it means to be a spiritual son or daughter. And so in the studio today, I'm super excited. I've got one of our very own. It's someone who is a spiritual daughter and who's experienced it, who's grown in it, and has taken her place and stance in it. So right now we've got Alison Mills with us, and I'm super excited because Allie comes all the way from Scotland, but we have built relationship with each other over the last 4 years. I'm going to let you tell a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I've experienced life with Mary and her husband and her family. It's been so fun coming into Kingdom Spiritual Family. It's biblical. It's one of the best things I think I've ever stepped into. Mm-hmm. So I come from Scotland, so you hear the accent. Hopefully Mary won't be having to translate too much English into English.
We can handle it.
Apologies. Hopefully you'll understand me just fine. And I'll be talking slow. I've learned to do that being in the US. It's been fun. So I've been in the US since 2019. Came here to do ministry school. Met Mary a week before school started. Yep. And been in each other's lives ever since. It was totally a God-ordained, not conversation, but connection.
Yeah, connection point.
I remember the first night we met, actually. I was over at your house and you were sharing your testimony and you guys were actually sharing you always have an open door and you love having people at your house. And I remember thinking, oh, they really mean that. And for me, I came all the way out here on my own. My family are back in Scotland. I left everything behind, job, friends. And so when you guys said that, I was like, oh, they mean that for sure. And when I came here, I was really broken emotionally, spiritually, physically, in just a lot of ways. And I knew there was something about you guys that I could really trust, and I really wanted to pursue a connection and build a relationship with you.
Yeah. And the Lord had highlighted you because I totally needed someone to help in that moment with my children, and I never entrust my children to people.
Like that's a fact. Like Mary is very, very particular, which all parents should be.
They should be.
To clarify.
Yeah, absolutely.
But Mary and Peter were very, very particular about who was going to watch their kids. There were missionaries out in Africa. She shared that on the podcast before. Been missionaries in Africa for over 16 years. Yep. You and Peter's over 25. And you don't really have a lot of people back home in Tanzania that you could have babysit your kids.
Yeah. And my in-laws were there.
Yeah.
But other than that, we didn't just leave our children to
any random
anyone or even people that were in our life. But we were very cautious of. But I did have a spiritual daughter out there that would definitely watch my children as well. So this thing on spiritual parenting and spiritual daughters, it does go way back. And sons, spiritual sons. Mm-hmm. And I've been really privileged over time for the Lord to give them to us in our lives. And it's our joy to be able to pour into people and to raise people up. So let's talk about what has having a spiritual parent in your life done for you. How has it unlocked things for you? What would you say? That's a loaded question.
It's a loaded question.
So take it slow and just go.
So it's kind of hard to articulate where to really start with that. Mm-hmm. I think confidence for sure is something that you guys unlocked within me.
Yeah.
You guys really poured into me. You saw me as I was. You saw me how I was going to be. You didn't leave me in the mess I was in either. You really helped me walk through things. You guys poured in so much. You walked me through a ton of healing. I was a mess when I met you. I really, really was. There's no other way to put it. That's putting it really bluntly. Mm-hmm. I'm sure some of you out there can relate. But when I came to ministry school, I just remember having this like feeling of being broken, and got connected to you guys and hung out all the time and just embraced what you guys had to offer, because I saw something on your life that I knew my life was missing. You guys carried stability, you carried family really well, you just love really, really well, and there was no judgment from you either. Mm-hmm. So that's something I would say
as spiritual parents, like, you know, it's all about discipleship.
Yeah.
It's about bringing people into your space, into the home,
yeah,
into even the grocery shopping,
yeah,
right, into the children's messes.
That's the thing as well. You guys, we do life together. That's the thing. We don't.
That's what discipleship.
That's what discipleship is. When you're going to be a spiritual parent for someone, you have to let them into your life. You have to open up yourself to some degree. Including boundaries and healthy communication, all that stuff is so important. But we do life together. Like, we have kind of since we met, really. Yeah. You opened up your home. I would come over to have family nights. We'd do holidays together. I was thinking about all of that and just how blessed I am to have you guys in my life, and how much I've grown and how much I've learned being under Kingdom family and learning what it is to be operating in realms of the kingdom that I didn't before, and have discipleship where I can ask questions about things of the spirit or things about family or anything else for that matter. Mm-hmm. You give me space to ask those things.
Yeah, and to just be yourself, really.
Yeah, fully myself.
Yeah, and I think about, you know, how Jesus was with the disciples.
Yep.
You know, even John laid his head on Jesus's chest. You know, I mean, it's the closeness, you know, being brought into that space, and as a spiritual parent, being willing to step into that vulnerability. Okay, I'm going to choose to trust by faith. Because, you know, as spiritual parents, I mean, I've had many, many people come into my life. I'll just speak from my perspective. I mean, even my husband, you know, where they say, hey, I would love for you to be a spiritual mom or dad to me. Oh, God told me that you guys are supposed to be my spiritual parents, you know, and we pray about it, and we're like, yeah, no, okay, that's what we want to do. But then it has to be up to the other person as well to connect and to go after connection. You know, I know, like with my family life, you've seen the crazy, right? Like, we are so busy on a weekly basis with all the things.
There's 6 of you. There's
with all the things that we're stepping into.
Yeah.
And so the reality is life gets busy. Everybody's life gets busy, both in the West. It doesn't matter where you are. Life can get busy when you are just doing life.
Yeah.
And so in the busyness, people have to be willing to knock on that door and come into the busyness and come into the craziness, and be willing to submit themselves to that as a spiritual son or daughter. And oftentimes people, they see you're busy, and then it's that orphan spirit in them, in a sense, that will be like, oh, they don't have time for me, or I can't have their undivided attention fully. Yeah. But really, talk about how life has been for you in the growth aspect by just coming into that space and cooking in the kitchen, not necessarily just cooking with me, but sitting and talking to me while I'm cooking, like doing life. You know what I'm saying?
Doing regular family things. Yeah, when you come into family, you see all of it. You see everything from the good,
the bad, and the ugly.
The bad, the ugly, the tantrums, the tiredness, the exhaustion, the joy, the laughter, the bickering, the frustration, the hanger. Like, hanger's a real thing.
Yep, being hangry is a real thing with children.
And I remember when you guys let me into that space, and you guys were really open about it. You said, look, our house is open. Like, if you want to come and see us, like, come hang out or whatever, and we'll get to know you, all those things. And I was like, all right, okay. And I remember at first, because of the orphan spirit, going back to that orphan spirit, it was so hard to push against that. You know, actually push past that and go, no, this is what they've said, and it's trusting people at their word. And I remember when you guys came into my life, we did have the conversation. The Lord actually told me, he's like, I want you to ask them to be your spiritual parents. And I was so nervous. We're in the car, she took me home one night, and the Lord's like, ask her. And I'm like, ugh, like, okay, like, this is... Honestly, like, my insides were like butterflies and rolling around, and I'm like, I don't...
Why do you think that was? I mean, well, I know why, but...
Because it was fear of rejection.
Exactly.
It was fear, like,
that's
you were
what
going
I wanted
to say
you to pull out.
no.
Yeah, a lot of people are so afraid of being rejected in this space.
And the thing is, no's not necessarily a bad thing if it's not the right people the Lord has
or the
for
right
you.
timing.
Or the right timing, because spiritual parents are something that I've desired for a long time in my life. And I think about people that I have back home who are really godly, amazing people. The connection didn't always go super, super deep. I have not shared with people back home the things that I've shared with Mary. You saw me differently, and it's not... I think part of it's a culture thing as well, because back home we don't always share our emotions, we don't always share what we're feeling or all of that stuff. But you guys, I don't know, there was something on your life. Like, I saw the fruit on your life. As I say, I saw what you carried. There was such a stability there. I knew I was safe.
Yeah.
So,
and let's think about that. You know, I know back home you had people that were spiritual parents at different seasons. So there's seasonal spiritual parents as well. Sure. So, you know, we play a part in people's lives. Like, you know, some people will be in your life forever. Other people will be in your life for a season. Yeah. And, you know, it's just like, you know, the Bible says that some will plant the seed. Yeah. Some will water the seed, and some will harvest.
Reap the harvest, yeah.
And so I don't take credit for everything that has happened in your life, because I know so many other people have imparted into you, right? Yeah. And I got to partake in more healing and then seeing the harvest. Like, I'm on the other end of it, where I'm seeing you by championing you, by calling you out, by calling those seeds forth that were planted inside of you, and calling those seeds out, and seeing you now write your book and
I know,
and writing other things, and Lord willing in the future I'm calling that out, stepping into music as well, and and speaking, and the different things that we've done as part of our ministry. You know, I mean, you being a missionary under our ministry, like that is huge in how I've been able to champion those things and pull those out. And I've been on that end, the other end of it, where I get to see and glean the harvest. Yeah.
It's so fun for, like, I can imagine from your end getting to see the harvest side, getting to see fruit of other people's seeds that have been sown. And I'm so thankful for everything that other people have poured in. Like I said, the connection wasn't always fully there to what it was, to what I was looking for. Like, I'd really, really prayed for a long time for that deep connection, especially when you're walking with the Lord and you're pursuing more and you know that there's more. It's hard to find, I think, people who can see where you're going and see what the Lord is doing, and actually cultivate those gifts and those talents and those skills. And like I say, there's people that come into your life for a season and actually just cultivate it a bit more, but maybe they're not meant to see the harvest of it, you know? And maybe they'll see the harvest but don't necessarily have an input like they did before. Right. And it doesn't make it wrong, it doesn't make the relationship wrong. Like we were saying, there's definitely times and seasons to have people in your life. It's like any relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And I go back to, I think about my childhood being raised with, you know, for the most part, an absent mother, and never knew my biological father, and had a stepfather in my life, and for a season only, but even then he was horrible. Yeah. And so I didn't understand what kingdom family looked like, you know, and God brought spiritual parents into my life when I was 12 years old, and I got to see what a godly family looks like. I sat at the table with them when they prayed together. I got to be a part of their home life and watched as, you know, Beth tackled her children on the floor and kissed them all over the face. And they acted like they didn't like it, but reality, they really did love it. Yeah. You know, I got to see when, you know, she was in a season where she was like, okay, what's causing, you know, my son to have these dreams that are not good. And we prayed through the room, and she was like, this is not necessarily a God thing, you know what I mean, kind of thing. And things that she would throw away. Just taking authority in the home. What does it mean to take authority in the home as a spirit, even as a spiritual parent? Take authority. So jump forward to my high school years. I can remember my senior year of high school. I would have this reoccurring nightmare dream. And I won't go into the whole thing. However, it was Beth that taught me the power and the authority of my words and what I carry in the kingdom realm. She says, you have to stand up. You have to take authority over that. And you have to go after it. And so I did.
Yeah.
I did. And in that place, it stopped.
Come on.
And I I began to learn, what does it mean for me to walk in that authority? So spiritual parents, they pass that heritage on to people. Just as in the natural realm, you have parents that pass a heritage of maybe music or financial heritage or different things like that. In the spirit realm, we pass things on as well.
Oh, for sure.
So I would say even me stepping into that place of writing books and things like that, like you came into this thing of like, oh, I feel like I'm called to write books. And I would say that over you.
Oh, you would call it out all the time.
You have books inside of you, and that inheritance got passed on to you.
Yeah, that's the thing as well. Like when you come under a spiritual parent, you glean their inheritance too.
Yes.
And it's low-hanging fruit. You guys carry such low-hanging fruit.
I love that. I love that. Say that again.
You guys carry low-hanging fruit.
Yes.
And it's so easy just to take and eat and receive what you guys have done the work for. There's things that I can operate in because of what you guys have cultivated. And likewise, it gets me excited because I know there's things that I've cultivated that other people are going to eat the fruit from.
Absolutely.
Which I would never have fully understood that without being under you guys. And I see what you guys cultivate in your family. And I remember being in your family, and like we said, you see everything. You see all the good, the bad and the ugly. But you give your children space to just be themselves and have their emotions. And I remember it was so unusual for me. Just, I think culturally, the family I grew up in wasn't necessarily bad. It was just very different. And you guys cuddle your kids all the time. You kiss them, like you were talking about how Beth taught you how to do that. That's the kind of mum you are. And I had no grid for that. I'm like, they're like touchy-feely like all the time. Like very, very close family. And how you talk to your kids and how you teach them how to manage their emotions, because that for me, I honestly didn't have a clue how to do that. My emotional health was, you stuff everything inside, you don't share it, keep it to yourself, and then you burst. Which is funny because when I was thinking about that, the Lord actually showed me at one point. I remember before, I think it was one of the first school sessions we had, and one night I was out a walk with my roommate and we were talking about this, and I told her this picture. I said, I feel like I've just got this bottle of emotions inside, and I feel like it needs to come out. And that's what I said. And the very next day, someone actually gave me a prophetic word. Said, I just see this bottle inside of you, and the Lord is taking it out and he's smashing it. And I was like, you don't even know me. Like, I had that conversation with her yesterday. Like, how do you, like, what? Totally threw me off. And ever since coming here, the Lord has just unraveled how to deal with emotions healthily, because you need to communicate your feelings. Emotions aren't bad. It's how you process them, how you deal with them, and how you guys talk to your kids when they're having fits. And you're like, okay, and sometimes like you really navigate well with the Lord. Okay, some things you're just going to leave them to it. Some things it's straight up anger. Okay, we're just going to feed you just now. Okay, like you need to control your emotions here. Like that's how you're reacting right now is not okay. Yeah. How could you have done that differently? Yeah. And I've seen you guys see that over and over again. And
one of the biggest things that I always say is you need to learn to control your emotions, not let your emotions control you.
Yeah, you guys are always saying
and
that.
And it's not wrong to have emotions. I mean, even the Bible says Jesus wept. One of the most famous, smallest verses in the Bible, but he wept.
Yeah.
And you think about when he went into the temple and he, in his righteous anger, turned over the tables. Emotions are not wrong. And it's so important to learn to sit in them, to deal with them. But when they control you and when you sit under them for so long, and I liken it to sitting under a cloud, because I can remember, I can remember a season when I sat under a cloud. I had a very depressive, kind of oppressive cloud that hung over me. And even to this day, Beth would say, my spiritual mom, she would say, I can remember, it was almost like I could physically see it, this dark cloud over your head. And it's true. I lived under a cloud for a long time. And so as a spiritual parent, I see those things.
Yeah. And you saw it in me, and you saw all the emotions I was feeling, up and down, whatever. And just, you guys gave me space to process that. And because I saw how you guys were with your kids and coming into family, it gave me so much permission to be like, okay, I can have these emotions. They're not wrong. I just need to learn how to deal with them and process them. And that was a whole journey, because I'd never done that before.
You never had permission.
I never had permission.
In that sense.
Yeah.
So it's learning how to come into a space of freedom, really.
Oh yeah, for
Walking into your freedom. And as spiritual parents, I would say that is what we're called to do, is create space for our spiritual sons and daughters to have that freedom, to grow into everything that they're called to be. I mean, I always say, and I've heard it from my spiritual mentors as well, like, I want my ceiling to be your floor. I want everything that I become to be your floor, so that you can stand on that and take the baton and go so much further than what I've ever done. And I've done a lot.
Yeah, you have done a lot in your life. And it's one of those things, we should always be going from glory to glory. We shouldn't be stuck in the same place. And that was the thing as well. You let me have my emotions, but you would never let me stay in that place. You would call it out, like, Ali, you're under the cloud. I'd be like, okay, or...
And in that space, not just say, hey, you're under the cloud, but what's going on?
What's going on in your heart? Like, what are you not talking about? Like, what's going on? Or sometimes I would just be overwhelmed with things, because I honestly, for me, I really had a lot of intense emotions, and it's just the way the Lord made me. And I've kind of learned to understand that. And I think when you have the space to be yourself, and actually, you guys gave me permission to step into that place of who the Lord created me to be. You didn't shut me down. You just called me higher. Yeah. You didn't leave me in the same place. And I think that's so important as a spiritual parent, not to leave not only your normal, like, your natural children, but your spiritual children as well. Like, you have, if they've given you that space in their life, you have a place to say, hey, like, what's going on? Like, let's help you get out of this then. And that's kind of why we've ended up doing inner healing sessions and coaching sessions and late night chats in the car and conversations on the way to the grocery store. We've had these deep, intense conversations where it's led me into greater freedom. So I'm like, oh, actually, this is who I'm called to be. Yeah. And like you said earlier, you called out the writer within me, like the songwriter, like, and I was operating in the songwriting realm before I came here. But honestly, in the last couple of years, it's kind of lay dormant, just because the Lord has done, it feels like he's done everything else.
You had to go through healing.
I had to go through healing. I couldn't... Yeah. I was doing songwriting and I was doing music and worship out of a place of performance. And it was an identity thing.
Yes. And that is the thing. I think as spiritual parents, it's so important to bring our children. I know it's so important for me in the natural realm just as much as it is in the spiritual realm, to bring any children that the Lord gives us, to really bring them into their identity and operating from a place of rest. That's what I always say. Operating from a place of rest, because something I had to fight through and struggle. I struggled with that because performance and lack of identity. My identity was in what I did. Yeah. It wasn't in who I was. And so our place as spiritual parents is to teach that place of, you simply need to just learn to be a daughter, learn to be a son, like the simplicity of that. And I don't mean a daughter or son to me, but or to us as spiritual parents, but a daughter and a son of God. Because when you can rest in that space of, he is my creator, he's my king, but man, he's also dad. He's daddy. And I know some people, sometimes they get offended at that. They're like, how can you call somebody so holy daddy? But what's interesting, when I did a word study, that word Abba.
Abba. Oh my goodness.
Actually means daddy. So it's the most intimate kind of place that you can call a father as a child. So in that, it means daddy. Yeah. And so we get to come to him as daddy. And as children, we get to climb into his lap. And we get to say, here I am. Yeah. And sit in that space and operate from that place of sonship, from that spiritual realm. The Bible says we're seated with Christ in heavenly places. You know that verse.
Yeah.
We're seated with Christ in heavenly places. It doesn't say we're going to be.
Mm-hmm.
It says we
It
are.
says we are.
So when we begin to step into the truth of who we are, we operate from that place.
Oh yeah, like when your identity is not in what you do, because that was why I had to go through a lot of healing, because my identity was so set in what I did, you know, and almost to the point where it was like codependent on other people as well.
Yeah.
Not almost, it was codependent on other people, because I was relying more on them than what I was to the Father. And like you're saying, that word Abba, it's so intimate, and you see children operate with their parents when it's healthy and when it's what I would call normal, what should be normal. They're just feeling themselves with their parents, and they come up and they're like wanting things, and they know their place. And that was the thing as well, like when I came into spiritual family, you gave me a place. Like it was that confidence in having a place, didn't have to strive for it, and that was so hard to overcome. That I was like, oh my goodness, like they're going to reject me if they find out this, or I need to work. And he's really taught me how to serve, but then there was a season, I think, where serving kind of became my identity. And you guys were like, you don't actually need to do that, you know? And I'm like, oh, okay. And then that shifted again. And now it's like when I'm over at your house and I see things, I'm actually calling the kids tired as well. Like, no, come on, let's do it. And they're like, I'm like, well, think about how much your parents do for you. Like, seriously. So, sorry, Mom and Dad, for all the things that I didn't do in the past. Please forgive me.
But it's so true. Jesus is our greatest servant. He was the greatest servant, and he serves us so well. And in turn, we're called to serve others. And that everything that we do, when you do it from a place of sonship, you call people higher from in that place of true identity. And that is serving. Yeah. And when you're calling people higher, you're serving people.
Yeah. And it's so fun to serve. Like, you guys are so easy to serve, and you love really, really well. So it comes from a place, like when I'm serving you guys, it's coming from that place, actually I really love you and I respect you. So it's not a chore. There's things that I just operate in now naturally, because I'm like, it's just so easy when you really have a deep trust with someone, deep relationship, deep respect. You just naturally do things, you know?
Yeah. So let's talk about the weightiness of spiritual parenting.
Yes.
I know for me, I feel the weight of that. I feel the weight of it. I've had people, come into my life that God, I really fully believe, has assigned to me. And you're one of those people.
Oh, I know.
You know, I'm
blessed.
Yes, I have several others. I have my spiritual daughter in Tanzania. Hello, Gaudi.
We love you, Gaudi.
And she's absolutely amazing, and served as well, and served our family, and still does to this day, even though we're in America. She's just always been my right hand as well. And I could not fully have done life there without her. And, God brought her into my life when she was only 16.
Wow.
Yeah, and she ended up living with us, and I was single at the time. So I want to talk about the weightiness of being a spiritual parent, and then also I want to jump into the single aspect. Like, people that are single can be spiritual parents as well. So let's talk about that. So the weightiness of spiritual parenting, I feel is so important to understand.
It is an important thing, and people do not fully understand it. I've said this to you before. It really irks me when people call you guys spiritual parents. Just going to say it does, because I know the relationship that we've cultivated. I know how much connection we have. We have pursued each other. We've both pursued connection, even when it's been hard. We've went deep into things. And when you give someone the title of a spiritual parent, it is a weighty thing. It can't just be something that you gloss over and go, oh yeah, they're my spiritual parents. Well, actually, how much do they know about your life right now? Do they know what's going on? Do they know about the addictions you have? Do they know about the relationships you have? Do they know what you're struggling with? Like, what your thought life is like? Do they know what's going on? And that's the thing. Like, there's a vulnerability there. There's an accountability there when you give someone that title. And I remember, I kind of shared a little bit earlier, but when I asked you guys to be spiritual parents, you guys prayed about it. And I think that's so important. It's not just oh yeah, sure, that's not going to be a problem. You guys really prayed about it. You sought the Lord, felt the Lord on it. And then you and I had a conversation. Peter was there too. We all talked about boundaries and what's your expectations? And I think that's important as well. Like, if you're coming into a relationship like this where you're wanting input from other people, you're wanting to be discipled, you're wanting accountability, vulnerability, all those things, you're trying to pursue deeper relationship with the Lord, and you're needing mentors to help you do that, you need that accountability, and you need that honest conversation. Okay,
what does this look like?
What does this look like? And this
what do
is
you
where
want
we're
it
at.
to look like?
Yes.
What do you believe it should look like? And I know, many people that have come in and out of our lives, they've had this idea of, spiritual parents, they're just going to always knock on my door and be there for me. But going back to the busyness of life, like, it's a two-way street. Like in the busyness of life, I am not going to drop everything and knock on Allie's door unless I know there's something seriously going on. I mean, if God instructs me to. Other times God's like, no, leave her be and stay quiet.
And that's so hard. And that's the kind of relationship we've cultivated. I knew when we had that initial conversation, you guys said, look, we have 4 kids, they're our priority, our marriage is a priority, and that's how it should be.
Absolutely.
You should be protecting your time with the Lord, then your marriage, your kids.
Yeah.
And then
clear boundaries have to be set in the midst of that.
And it's like the people that come into that inner circle, there has to be boundaries. There has to be an honour of one another, protecting each other's hearts, protecting each other's space. And there's times, even when boundaries have been overstepped, you have a conversation about it and you realign each other, realign with each other on, okay, maybe that shouldn't have happened. We apologise, we forgive each other, and then you move on. And even that was totally new for me, actually. Apologising for things. You guys helped me walk into that a bit more. And because it was like this shame thing of, if I admit that I'm wrong, that's failure, that's, you're going to reject me because I did something wrong. Like, because it's this whole perfectionist thing that I was operating into. Yeah. There's so much that you guys have helped me walk through by having those boundaries and actually being firm in those boundaries too. Like, actually, we need some space just now. And even, I remember at the beginning, I found that hard, but I knew I had to respect it. And I feel like our relationships get stronger because of that.
Right. And, oftentimes people that operate out of a deep orphan spirit will be like, oh, rejection. They're rejecting me. They're rejecting me. Just because you put in boundaries, or because you don't answer that text right away. Or because, you're not coming to that function that they have going on, or, or you're not doing things according to their time frame. And so I would encourage people that are looking for spiritual parents to think about those things. To think about, how can I lean in and keep connection and have these brave conversations if you've been let down by people that you've asked to be in your life and that filling that space as a spiritual mother or father. I mean, I can remember there was one time in my life where I had somebody that I looked up to, that was a woman who would preach, teach, all the things, and they came to me and said, I feel like I'm called to disciple you, so basically be a spiritual parent in that realm of discipleship, because I see the strong calling on your life, and the reality was we had 2 meetings and then they never pursued it again. And I was so hurt by that.
That's hard.
I was so hurt by that. And I was looking forward to meeting and looking forward to our conversations. But then on the flip side, I also never followed through with, hey, aren't we supposed to be meeting? Aren't we? Because I was looking for her to make the connection. And so many spiritual parents, our spiritual children, will look for the parent to always be the one reaching out. And when you got to go back to the fact that, people have busy lives, and you can't always look for them to pursue connection with you. You also have to pursue connection. So on my end, I did not pursue that connection. I was looking for that connection and thinking, oh, if they do really want this, then they're going to pursue connection. And that was the orphan spirit in me speaking.
The orphan spirit's awful. And I know, because I was operating.
Well, we'll have to do a whole other podcast on the orphan spirit.
I feel like that's a whole other conversation.
It is. But let's go back just to the weightiness of spiritual parenting. So I know as a spiritual parent, I have responsibility. I have responsibility to pursue connection with your heart. And just like you have responsibility to pursue connection and respect connection.
Yes.
And honor connection.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, it's definitely a two-way thing of, like we say, honouring each other, respecting each other, and protecting each other's hearts. And that's so important. Like, it's not a selfish relationship. It can't be. If you're just looking for it to be one-sided, I think you're looking for the wrong thing, to be honest.
Yeah.
That might sound really harsh, but I just know for me...
Well, to be honest, let's just call it what it is. That's selfish.
That is really selfish.
It's selfish.
You know, and for me, like, it's been hard at times when you guys have put in boundaries, but I've understood it's needed. And it's almost like a maturing has had to happen. You know, like, you don't know people's past and people's history and what other relationships have been like, because I know people get hurt in relationships and there's expectations there, and there's expectations that you're maybe not even verbalising. Mm-hmm. So that was the thing as well with us. It got to the point where I was actually starting to share things more and confronting issues that were coming up in my heart, like, okay, when you did this, this is how I felt about it. And, you know, and we moved on. It's like, okay, so where's that coming from? And more often than not, like we said, it was the orphan spirit. Mm-hmm. So it's so important to even push past that and trust that this person has allowed you into their life. They've given you that space. They will make space for you. Yeah. You know, and it's like Danny Silk's book, he talks about keeping your love on, and sometimes that's hard, and sometimes it can be really frustrating when people are like, oh, but I need it. It's like, well, actually, no, you don't, because you've lived this long without it. You know, it's like, I love you, and I'm here for you, and I'm championing you, and I'm not rejecting you. It's just, tonight's not going to work.
Yeah, that's good.
You know?
That's good. It's so important, and it's so true. Boundaries are so important, and you know, oftentimes, you know, there are times spiritual children will look at boundaries as walls.
Mm-hmm. Boundaries are not walls.
Oh no, I'm being rejected. Things. They have a wall against me. They don't want to be. I know, because I was there. Yeah. I've been in that space.
Me too. I've been there too. Like,
you know, and it's not a wall. Like,
it's definitely not
a good parent puts boundaries up.
Yeah, because they love you.
A healthy parent puts boundaries up. It's not control.
No, definitely not control. If it's control, there's something
wrong. Let's talk
wrong.
about control, though. Let's talk about that for a minute. Yeah. Like, because sometimes spiritual children that want spiritual parents sometimes will feel like the parent is trying to control a situation because they're calling them out on things or different things like that.
Yeah.
But that's not the reality. Like,
it's
if a spiritual parent's heart is to really love and raise up, they're not going to try to control a situation. They're going to give space.
Yeah.
Space for the mistakes, space for the failures, space for the growth.
Yeah.
You know, space for them to figure it out on their own.
Yeah. You guys give me a lot of space to do that.
Like, not helping you with the chicken in the kitchen.
Oh my goodness, the chicken story, that's a whole other thing. Like, there were so many things. I'll get to the chicken story in a second. I feel like it's important to see this as well. We're talking about those boundaries and those walls. When people have given you that space in their life, it's trusting their heart. Like, when you're building a relationship with someone, especially a spiritual parent, a spiritual son or daughter, it's knowing their heart's for you, and it's for the best. Like, sometimes they do things that you don't understand. They'll say things, or they'll not say things. Yep. It really frustrated me at times, because there's times where you literally left me be, and I'm like, why are you not responding? Like, why are you leaving me be? And then a couple of days will go by after I've got through my funk, and that's after I've processed it, and I'm like, oh yeah, the Lord told me this, and you're like, well, good. Because, like, I could see what you, like, it's come from your point of view. You could see what was going on. You could see what the Lord was doing. And straight up at times, he was like, you don't touch that.
Yeah,
you know?
There are times where he's just like, no, you're not going to go. Sometimes as spiritual parents, we try to be the savior.
Yeah, and be a crutch.
And the Lord is like, nope, keep your hands off of it. Let them walk through this valley.
Yeah.
Spiritual children should have the confidence and know, hey, they're still going to be there for me. They're going to love me.
Yeah.
But I know I have to walk this road.
Yeah. And that was the thing. So I'm going to tell the chicken story because I feel like it's important to reiterate what we've just talked about. And more often than not, I found myself over at Mary and Pierre's house. And Mary's an amazing cook, so she's usually the one that cooks dinner in their house.
Thank you.
And when we were getting to know each other, her and Peter were both like, so when are you going to cook for us? I'm like, oh, I don't cook. Like, that's how that goes. I don't particularly enjoy it. And it's not that I can't cook.
Yeah.
I just don't cook. I am actually a good cook.
So a good amount of time had passed, and then we kept visiting that again. Hey, when are you going to cook? Because we would see these things where you're like, I don't do this, I don't do that, and let me tell you, I remember Beth in my life was always like, don't say you can't. Yeah, because cannot be in your vocabulary. And so it's that's so funny. So it's calling you into the strengths of what actually is in you.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So go back to that story.
So back to the story. So I was over at their house and I decided, you know what, I'm going to cook dinner for you. And bearing in mind...
And we were shocked.
They were shocked. They were like, are you sure?
She's actually doing it.
Do you want me to take it back?
I mean, I never said, Allie, you were going to cook dinner.
Yeah, they were just asking because they knew there was an area in my life that needed growth more than I did. I wasn't even fully aware that it was an issue.
It was more than cooking, though.
It was more than cooking.
What came out of that? But tell the story.
So much came out of that. And I'm in your kitchen and I started cooking. And there's 6 of us to cook for. Actually, there was 7 because there were 7 including me. Yep. Mary, Peter, the 4 kids, and me, 7 of us. Which is a lot of food. So when you don't cook, that's a lot of food for a lot of people. A lot of things to get right, a lot of things to manage. You do it all the time. Like, I do not cook for like 6 or 7 people. So I had to make sure everything was hot, make sure everything was ready at the same time, and make sure they were starting to set the table. There was a whole bunch of things that were swirling in my head. And I remember I'd actually wrote out a list of like kind of like a timeline of, okay, this time you need to do this, and this is how you're doing this. And I remember...
That was your admin coming out.
That was my admin gifting coming out. So I'm at the kitchen and I'm at this chopping board and I was going to cook a chicken. And I've cooked chicken before, like chicken breast where you cut it up where it's super easy. A whole chicken I hadn't touched. So I'm standing there in the kitchen and Mary, bless you, you left me to it, which was really hard for you.
Well, the Lord told me to.
Yeah, like which I didn't know about. But you didn't helicopter.
Because I remember you turning around and you go, "Can you please help me cut this chicken?"
Because I didn't know what I was doing. I'm like, what's wrong with this thing?
I could hear the panic in your voice.
I was so stressed. Like,
and
sweat.
Inside, I was just giggling because I knew this was a moment of growth for you. And the Lord was like, "Don't touch the chicken. You're not going to help her." And then you started getting upset. I could feel it on you, and you're like.
Because I was standing in the kitchen.
And I kept saying, Allie, you can do this.
You can do it. You did. You championed me through the whole thing. And I'm standing in the kitchen and the sweat is pouring off me because I was so stressed. And she's sitting there at the table. And I think you were helping one of the kids with the homework. I was like, please, can you come and help? Like, please. Like, begging for help. And you're like, I really can't right now. But you've got this. You've got this. You've got this. And I'm like seething inside. I was so mad. And I remember turning back round.
I said, you don't need me. You've got this.
Yeah, I didn't hear that though. I was just like, you've got this. You're like, basically, no, I'm not helping is what I heard, right? So I'm standing there. And I'm like, right, Holy Spirit, it's just me and you because I'm not getting any help from anyone else. And you know what? And I started listening into the Lord in that moment. And he's like, right, just do this. Just start massaging the chicken to get the skin off. And I'm like, what? Like, that sounds weird. But it worked. And I'm like... Oh, okay. And then it did get a bit easier, but the Lord was breaking off like perfection and stuff and just all this pressure. And then later you came into the kitchen when I was nearly done and you're like, how are you getting on? And then you saw the sweat coming off of me. And you're like, this really stresses you out. And I'm like, yeah. And then I kind of was in a bit of a panic because I was like, I don't know if this is going to be ready in time. And you were like, oh, that's okay. You know? And I remember feeling just this piece of, oh, like, it's okay to fail. And I remember telling you this story before and you just saying, like, you weren't failing. And I'm like, oh, but I felt like I was. And the more stressed I was getting, the more pressure I was putting on myself to essentially perform and get it right. Because her kids are, like, food critics as well, right? So I had all this pressure.
Well, to be fair, that's because we had a restaurant.
We had a restaurant. So that's why I'm saying, when I say Mary's a good cook, it's not a lie. And... your kids are like food connoisseurs, right? And they're so honest because you've given them that space to be honest about just whatever they're feeling and stuff. And I was so like uptight about it. But the Lord was breaking off perfection that day as well. And I think as well, it was actually really hard for me to ask for help. Like, I didn't want to, but I was like, I don't know what the heck I'm doing.
And then when you asked and you didn't get it, you were like,
oh my goodness. And yet my anger goes to resentment. And I remember... I didn't know any of this, what the Lord had told her. So just carried on like cooking, everything came together, and then Peter was like, oh, you're actually a really good cook. And I said, yeah, I didn't say I can't cook, I said I don't cook. You know, and then he called me out for not stewarding it, and I was like, just shut up and eat your dinner. Like, but like a year later, we were talking about that, because it's just funny, because this was so long ago. We were talking about the story, and I was saying, you know, like when you didn't help me, I was so mad. And she's like, oh, I know you were so mad. And then you said, but the Lord told me not to help. And I'm like, what? Like, I was raging, you know, but it cultivated something in my relationship with the Lord. And I think as a spiritual parent, it's given those spiritual kids grace to like, actually, you need to figure this out on your own with the Lord, and that there's an importance on that. You can't just jump in, like you said, and save them all the time. There'll be times where like I've needed you, and there's times where like it's been a thing where you have came and helped or whatever. So it's not like she just abandons me all the time. Like, no, just kidding. Like, that's orphan spirit. But
growth is so important.
You need to grow. If you're not growing,
you know, in the natural realm, I always tell my children, you know, that they're leaders. That's a big thing. I always tell my kids, you're a leader, you're a leader, you're a leader. And it's because I really truly believe that you know, we're always leading something. I truly believe they're leaders, and we all are leading something. If you're not leading a company, a business, a ministry, you know, whatever, you're leading yourself.
Yeah.
And
you
you've
need to know
got
how to lead yourself.
learn how to lead yourself.
It's so important.
And it's so, so, so important how to truly step into who you're called to be. And as spiritual parents, we get to pull that out. And by not being a crutch.
No. And I think
but being an advocate of how much you carry.
Yeah.
And the gold that is inside of you. And pulling that out.
Oh, totally, for sure. Like, you guys have really pulled out stuff that I didn't even know was there. Like the writing gift that's been on my life. For the longest time, I was always told, or I always remember having this lie spoken over me that I was never good at English. I have a very logical, mathematical brain. That's how I think. I see problems. I see solutions. But English, for me, English was always something that's like, anything could be the right answer. Whereas I'm very black and white. I like a definite answer. So for me, breaking off that lie was huge, because I finished my book, which honestly, I really still can't believe that that's happened, you know, and it's in the editing process, so there's still a process to go, but the fact that I was able to finish it, and you guys, like you say, you were saying to your children, like your natural children, you're leaders, and then you're telling me, like, actually, Ali, you're a leader too, like, we see these things on your life, like, you're a writer, you're called to write books. I'm like, what? You know, and I remember after I finished the book, coming over to your house and telling you, like, ever since I finished, all these lies started swirling around my head, that no one's going to want to read this, like, who do you think you are? And you just started calling me out and calling me higher, and it just built up my confidence again, like, oh, actually, you're right. And it made me remember, when the lies start swirling, it means you're stepping into something good.
Absolutely.
You know,
you're already breaking through. You're not on the brink of breakthrough, but you're already breaking through. And so, because the enemy will always try to come knock and tear down the confidence, tear down, you know, who you are, knock on your door with lies. Yeah. But we get to be powerful people. We are powerful people. We get to step into being that powerful person by choosing to either believe in the lie or believe in the truth. And that's one of the things I with my own natural children, I'm like, you're powerful to make choices. Yes. And that's part of spiritual parenting too. Releasing your sons and daughters to make powerful, powerful choices in governing themselves and governing what they're called to govern in their sphere of influence. Yeah. That's really good, Mary. I would totally agree with that. Because you've called out leadership, and I would not have finished the book without your input, without you championing me all the way through it, even when it was hard for you, you know, like on the other side of that. Just times, because you were writing your book at the same time, and you've actually been writing your book longer. It's just taking you a longer process, you know? Yeah, because I battled also the perfection thing, and I battled, you know, those lies of, you know, who's going to want to read this, and is it even good enough? Is it this? Is it that? And I had to walk my own journey with that. And, you know, everything as spiritual parents, you know, there are people out there that'll be watching this list or listening to this, and you go, I can never be a spiritual parent, you know, even if you're single. I want to talk about that and singleness as well. For sure. I can never be a spiritual parent. But the reality is you can, because of the things you've walked through.
Yeah.
So you take those valleys that you've walked through, and those valleys are literally your point of authority in the sphere of influence that you're called to, in the people's lives that you're called to. It's your place of authority, and you get to speak into those things. And so the battles you've won, that is a platform for you to speak from. That is a platform that you get to speak into other people's lives. Or, maybe it's people's lives in your place of governance, like your company or your ministry or your youth group. That's ministry too. Or, anywhere. Yeah. Maybe it's your band that you're a part of. Maybe it's the people you're leading. But you get to speak into their lives, and you get to say, hey, I've walked through this, and I know that you can come out on the other end as well in a powerful way. Rising up as a powerful person.
That's good. So going back to that place of talking about being a spiritual parent as a single person, I can relate to that because I'm now in my 30s. I'm not married yet, which is hard in itself. And you and I have had lots of conversations about that process and the disappointment and that. But at the same time, knowing where my lane is and knowing what the Lord has still called me to step into as a leader.
Yep.
Just because I'm single does not make me any less of a spiritual mom. Like, I will have spiritual children come under me. The Lord has placed people in my life who I do get to pour into, and it can be different ages, which is always kind of fascinating. Sometimes you can be discipling people who are older than you, which it can be a little bit unnerving at times, but it is spiritual parenting.
Because really, spiritual parenting comes from that place of wisdom and knowledge. And so the more things you've walked through in life, you gain wisdom in.
Oh, for sure.
And so, like I said, it's just all the things that you've gone through, the valleys and all of that, the mountaintops, you get to govern from that place. You get to speak into people and pour in as a single person. Yeah,
for sure. And it's like having that permission to know you've got that place to speak into people as well. Like, that was hard at first because I do respect people who are older than me, like, so much. I have so much to glean from people who are 2, maybe even 3 times my age, who have a ton of life experience. They've walked with the Lord a long time. They've been married for a long time. They've had their own family. There's lots for me to still glean, even though I'm not a physical parent myself. I'm not a wife yet. There's all those things that I can still carry wisdom in, and I can still talk to people and be like, hey, like, maybe how you were operating there wasn't exactly the best. Or even people who've been married a long time, and you and I have talked about this before as well, about how sometimes people get married and almost one of the spouses, their kind of dreams almost die, so it's like, okay, you have permission, even as a wife, as a mom, as a father, as a husband, you still have to cultivate your gifts. Like, what has the Lord called you to step
and as
into?
a single person, when those people that are even married open that space for you to speak into with the wisdom and knowledge that God's giving you, you get to call out those things. You get to call out, you get to present those questions and call out truth. It's
such a privilege being able to pour into people like that, because sometimes for me it's having to push past the lie that I'm not enough because I'm not married yet. And that's such a lie that kind of weighs heavily on singles in the church, and I just want to throw it out, because you do have a space, you do have authority, you do carry wisdom.
Yep.
You carry that wisdom to be able to pour into other people. The Lord didn't give you that just for nothing.
Yep.
Who has He called you to speak into? Who has He called you to lead in this season? Like, where's your lane? Like, what has the Lord called you to step into? How can you pull those things out of others? How can you champion them and what they're supposed to be doing?
And there's always going to be those others around you. Like, the biggest thing is sitting with Holy Spirit in your sphere of influence and saying, God, show me, who are the others? Who are the people that I'm called to pour into? Because all of us, I do believe, are called to be spiritual mothers and fathers in some way, fashion, or form as we pour into other people. Because I think about, Matthew talks about going into the world and making disciples. Yeah. Everybody is called to make disciples. You are called to make disciples.
Yes.
You're called to disciple people. And when you disciple people, you are pouring in. You're being that spiritual mother, that spiritual father, and you're raising them up to be influencers in their sphere of influence. And it becomes this trickling effect over time. So your life is not meant to just influence your son or your daughter or, or your immediate parents, your immediate family. It goes beyond that. And I believe that families, when you step into this space of being healthy, we're called to open our homes and we're called to pour into others as fathers and mothers.
Yeah, that's really good. There is something on connection with other people as well. It has to take intentionality. When you're a spiritual parent, it can't just be, we've spoke about this before, like once or twice a year.
Yes.
Or whatever.
That's not even building relationship.
It's not building relationship. I think about even friendships. Friendships need to meet more often than that for it to be decent, Yeah. But for me, I think about what we've cultivated, and there's been intentionality there. There's been deep connection because we've went after it. We've dug into it. There's been an openness into family. And like you said, the Lord is not just going to invite anyone into your space. There is people He's going to put in front of you, and you need to really pray about it. Okay, is this someone the Lord wants to let me in? And if so, okay, I have a responsibility there to open up myself a little bit.
Yes, be open and look for the opportunities of who you are called to pour into.
Exactly. I think that's important as well, because there will be people who just appear, doesn't necessarily mean they're from the Lord, and I even think about that, like there's people who have come into your life who haven't stayed, and like that's hard in itself. So it's like, how do you as a spiritual mom like process that, and
it hurts sometimes, because you do start pouring in and you do a little bit of life together and then they disappear. And you're like, wow, but I did all of this for them.
I know.
And that's the other side of spiritual parenting that isn't always beautiful. That it does hurt, and you have to process that with the Lord, and you have to be willing to let them go. Just like your own children in the natural realm, you have to let them go. And I always tell my children in the natural realm, like taking it back to Jesus, I mean, I'm like, listen, you cannot, be a Christian or be, a disciple of Jesus without really having relationship with Him, and just, thinking you have relationship because of mom and dad have relationship with Him. You have to find Him on your own. And so when it comes to spiritual children, we have to let them go and let them find what they're looking for on their own. If they disappear, you can call them, you can knock on the door and say, hey, how are you? And I do at times, but in reality, it's like, if they don't want that connection, don't force the connection. Don't force the connection.
No, don't force the connection.
Because they're not obviously supposed to be, and be in your life. And maybe it was one sentence, maybe it was one smile, maybe it was one hug that planted a seed. Maybe it was one conversation, after a couple of meetings that planted a seed that someone else will come along and water, and then later on harvest. But the biggest thing is you're faithful to that one hug. You're faithful to that one coffee date. You're faithful, you know what I mean? Being faithful.
That's so good. Yeah, for me, it's like watching those people come in and out of your life. I find that hard because I know you, and I know your heart, and I know your heart's for connection, and you really care about people. So it's that people cannot push past the orphan spirit enough, or push past their own rejection, to know, like, oh, actually they still love me, like they're not going to reject me. Like, okay, sometimes people, they kind of get scared, they share, and then they're like, oh my goodness, like,
I share too much,
vulnerability hangover, and
I like that vulnerability hangover.
It's so true, because there's times that I've done that with you guys, and I'm like, maybe it was too much, but then you guys still pursued connection. You guys have been like an amazing covering, and there's so many stories of just intentionality of things, and just being able to bless one another, because that's the thing, it's a two-way relationship. And we're talking about serving, and we've spoken about serving before, but just being able to cover you in ways, like there's things that I've seen that you guys desire or that you guys want, but you wouldn't necessarily ask for it. So like, as a spiritual daughter, it's seen those things and being like, actually, you know what, I'm just going to bless you with this. And you've been like, what? Like, go have a date night and I'll watch the kids or something, and it's seeing that fill your love tanks as well, because that's the thing as well, like, relationship is all about pursuing each other's hearts, and knowing each other as well. You know, I feel like we do,
and trusting.
Trust is
because that's
huge.
another thing. Like you talked about it, vulnerability, hangover. A lot of times people will come, you know, and they want that time, and they will pour out their hearts, and then fear
comes in.
You know, fear comes in and tries to steal that space of like, oh, this is okay. Like I can trust them. I can, you know, and a lot of times it's because of past trust issues. But if you can just hold your place and really push into that space of, you know what, I can trust them because God said I can trust them. There are some people you can't trust. Let's just be real.
Sure. Oh, that's so real.
There's some people that call themselves spiritual mothers and fathers and that really aren't. And you can't trust them.
Yeah. That's the thing as well. Like, I've seen people being really hurt by people who are so-called spiritual parents or so-called
I mean,
mentors.
I was hurt by people in the church. I mean, there are plenty of ministers out there that, you know, call themselves spiritual mothers or fathers, but they're not. Yeah. And they actually don't have good agendas. Yeah. However, there are those that are. Yeah. And so you have to take that little bit of mustard seed faith, right? That helps you step into this place of trust. Yeah. That from that trust will catapult you into greater faith to say, you know what, I'm going to stand and I'm going to choose to be in this place with them. I'm going to choose to trust their heart just and let them love my heart as well.
That's the thing, because even in that, like you and I, like I say, we've known each other over 4 years now, and there's times where I've let you disappear for 2 weeks because of my own insecurity, because of rejection or fear or whatever it is that's come up, because something's been triggered, you know, and you guys just give me that space to be like, okay, like we're still here. And for me, it was so humbling to have to come back and be like, okay, we need to talk about this. You know, and we did, and it grew me, because now I don't disappear for 2 weeks at a time, maybe a couple of days at most. Still working on it, just saying.
Maybe 3 days.
I know, but I mean, considering what it was at first, it was like 2 weeks, maybe even more.
For sure.
You know? But,
and there were times in that time frame, I would text you sometimes and you wouldn't text back.
Oh, yeah.
There were
it'd be so hard. I'd be like, nope, not responding to that. Nope.
There were other
Straight
times.
Up pride, seriously.
Yeah, and there were other times where I absolutely didn't even text you.
Oh, you
because
didn't.
The Lord was like, no.
Yeah.
Just sit on this and let her come to you.
Let her stew. And then it's funny because afterwards you're like, oh, I knew you were mad. Like, I could feel it. I could sense it in your response, because when I did respond, it was like straight one-line answers. Yeah. You know, not anything deep, not anything pursuing connection, that stuff. It wasn't anything like that. Just like straight up answers. And it was usually, I tend to find it was usually like ministry related stuff. If we were texting back and forth, I'd be like, answering that. Personal questions, no.
Yeah.
Because it was self-protection, because I was so used to having to protect myself and pushing past that and knowing you guys. Yeah. Knowing I trusted you guys. You know, you were worthy of my trust, because you had proven yourselves like over and over and over again. You were loyal. You didn't let me down, you know. Like, even when I really needed you, you were there. Yep. You know, even recently, like, just something I was walking through, and you sat in the car with me and just let me be, which was so hard.
In your puddle of tears.
In my puddle of tears, you know, and just
in the silence. Well, the silence doesn't bother me.
It doesn't bother. It bothered me, you know. But even in that, that grew something in me as well, because it actually it pulled something out that'd been in there a long time. And I think as a spiritual parent, you need to be aware of the things that are going on in the spiritual kid's heart. You know, okay, what do they actually need right now? And leaning into Holy Spirit, okay, they know that I love them. How do I love them in this moment? Like, what do they actually need? Yeah. And some things it will be a hug. Some things it will just be there, listen to their emotion. That's the thing as well. Like, being a woman, like, time in the month is a real thing. Like, some things have shown up at your house, and just being in a puddle of tears, like, I don't know why I'm upset. And Peter's like, your period needs to come. And I'm like, yeah, like, not wrong. And then it's just that realization of, like, again, processing your emotions. Like, oh yeah, like, that's what that is. Okay, like, just being self-aware. And he's a really
and it's okay that I'm emotional right now.
Yeah, I was like, I'm feeling all these feelings. I just feel really soft and tender. And, you know.
All right, so I know we need to land this plane soon. So I want to talk about covering as a spiritual mother and covering as a spiritual daughter.
Yes.
How has my covering affected you? grown you. What has that done for you? And then vice versa. Let's talk about
versa.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, covering flows both ways. We've spoke about it a lot. Like, this relationship isn't just one-sided. It isn't just you guys pouring into me all the time.
Yeah.
And it can't be. If it is, that's an issue. That's a problem.
Yeah.
You know, because if you're just taking all the time, like we said before, it's selfish.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes spiritual parents can be like that. Like if there's a bit of a selfishness in there or control thing, like they can take
an entitlement as well.
Entitlement, yes. Expect their spiritual sons or daughters, watch my kids, clean after me, do this, do that, you know, without actually being poured back into. So I mean, I've actually met people that were supposed to be spiritual children to other people that actually walked away feeling more like an orphan.
Yeah.
But let's talk about this covering.
Yeah, covering is so important. It's not just you covering me, it's me covering you as well. When you come into a spiritual parent-child relationship, son or daughter, mother and father, whatever it is, the connection that's there, you get to know one another.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just some surface level thing. It goes deep.
Yeah.
You find out each other's likes and dislikes.
Well, it'll become what you want it to become.
It is.
And what you put into it.
It is. But for me, like, I always had the expectation, what we have is always what I had in my head. It's actually better than what I expected, because you were vulnerable and you opened up yourself to things that I had to ask, like questions and stuff. You gave me space to ask questions and, you know, push past that. Do I actually even have permission to ask this? You know? So you and I have spoken about
everything under the sun.
Everything. Seriously. If you have any questions, messages, and we'll maybe talk about it in a podcast.
There you go.
So, yeah. But going from that, because of that connection and because of the relationship, it's allowed me to cover you because I know where your weaknesses are. You know where my weaknesses are. You cover me, I cover you. I see things that you need before you need it, you know, and there's been so many times. It's been so fun because we get to do ministry together now, which is one of my favourite things. I love it. I love travelling with you guys, and you and I have done a few ministry trips just on our own, and just watching people watch us, because I don't care what people think when we're together, because I know my job is there to cover you.
Yeah, and
as a spiritual daughter.
And you know your position as well. Like,
I know.
In my heart. You know your position in my heart, like where you stand. There's no questioning it.
Yeah.
And there shouldn't be in you know, a spiritual son or daughter, between a spiritual mother and father as well. There should never be a question. You hit on weakness and vulnerability. I think is just as important for spiritual sons and daughters to see our weaknesses.
Oh, for
You've
sure.
seen me. You have seen my weaknesses.
Yes.
And you know what they are. And you cover me so well in them. And I've seen your weaknesses.
Oh, my weaknesses.
And I know what they are. And I cover you in that. And it's so important.
Yeah.
And being vulnerable as that spiritual mother and father, I think gives place to spiritual sons and daughters to say, hey, it's okay for me to feel this way. It's okay for me to fail sometimes. It's okay for me to not be perfect.
Yeah.
It's okay for me to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And knowing that, hey, even though I'm called to lead, even though I'm called to be that leader, I still battle with these things, and it's okay for people to see that.
Yeah. And it's been so freeing for me to see that as well, because then it gives me place to even speak into that with you, like champion you and pull you higher and be like, come on, Mary, you know who you are. Like, you're always saying that to me. You know, it's like, come on, you've got this, you can do this.
And there's days where I'm like, I don't feel like going and preaching. I don't feel like going and doing this. And you're like, hey, you are.
Yeah. And even vice versa, because I've been like that too. Even recently, I was like, I want to go tonight. Like, I just don't want to go. And you're like, we're going. And as a spiritual daughter, it's submitting to authority and being like, I trust that you've heard the Lord on this, because sometimes I haven't heard anything. So it's trusting that they've heard the Lord for you and being like, okay, I'm still going to go. And it's when I go in that place of giving you my full yes, completely covering you, even though I might not have wanted to be there, I then have to kind of make a decision for that to die, and then choose to be there, whether I like it or not. It's like, no, I'm choosing to be joyful in this situation. I get to do this. I get to cover you. I get to see what you need before you need it. Look after your things, you know, because I've seen you operate in ministry at times, and it's almost like, because you love people so well, you know, you really take care of the person in front of you. And for me, as a spiritual daughter, it's like, okay, like, where's her stuff? Like, has she got enough water? Does she need to be rescued from this conversation right now. It's things like that, because I know you really, really well, and it's making sure that your needs are met too. As much as you take care of my needs at times, it's important for me to reciprocate that and not just be really selfish and be like, Ash will take care of herself. Like, no. Like, that's not how it works.
Spiritual sons and daughters sometimes can step into that role and become those armor bearers.
Yeah, for sure. That's another podcast. That's
the
for
reality
sure.
of it. Yes. Another podcast for sure. All right. We've got to land this plane.
Yep.
All right. So I want you to speak from a single perspective and talk to the single people out there who are potential mothers and fathers and call them into that space.
Yeah. What I would suggest and what I would advise would be to know your identity. Push past the orphan spirit, push past rejection, know your place as a son or a daughter, know your place first as a son or a daughter of the King.
So good.
And then if you have spiritual mentors, or if you want to be a spiritual mentor, be confident in your abilities, your gifts, your wisdom, because you have something to share. You're not too old, you're not too young. So many people get to a certain age and think, I have nothing to give. People like that, I have so much to glean from, because like I said, you have way more life experience than me. So I just want to champion you to step into your greatness and own who you are and know your identity. That would be my biggest thing to say.
All those singles out there. And I want to speak to the families, to the mothers and fathers, the ones that already are mothers and fathers and that are married. I want to speak to you, and I want to challenge you to rise up and invite people, invite the single people, invite married couples, other married couples, invite people, teenagers into your home.
Yeah.
And begin to pour in. Don't be afraid to pour in. Don't be afraid to make connection, even if sometimes connection hurts, because it does. Let's be honest. You heard some of that on the podcast. But step up and step out and begin to be the leader that you're called to be in your sphere of influence, whether even if it's in your business, even if it's in your ministry, wherever it is, everyone's called to lead something. If you're leading yourself, that's the most important, but then it's also just as important to lead others. So step up, rise up, be the spiritual mother and father that you are called to be. And I fully believe, especially in this hour, that there are so many people called to parent, to be that spiritual mother and father, and to rise up, because we have so many people in this world that carry such an orphan spirit, that need mothers and fathers to come into their lives and to really champion them, but to also call them higher, call out the weaknesses and call forth the gold. And that's what we're called to do. Call out the weaknesses and call forth the gold. So, yes.
That's good.
That's good. Call out the weaknesses, call forth the gold.
Exactly. I couldn't have said it better myself, Mary.
That's awesome. Well, we love you guys. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Roar Out Loud podcast. Hey, thank you so much for tuning into today's episode of the Roar Out Loud podcast. If you want to learn more about us, we are super easy to find on all social media platforms under the tag Roaring Hope INT. I'm going to say that again. We're under the tag Roaring Hope INT. Hey, don't forget it. As we are growing, check out our platforms. Our goal is to offer plenty of resources for you to get inspired and to release your roar. We love hearing from our listeners. So if you have any burning questions you want us to answer here on this podcast, or topics you would love to hear discussed, write into us at roaringhope@gmail.com. Likewise, if you're interested in booking me as a speaker for your event or church event, you can contact us as well at roaringhope@gmail.com. So I've shared on this podcast that I'm a life coach and a licensed minister who has over 20 years of experience in ministry, both domestically and internationally. And I've walked many people through many things. So if you are looking to receive greater breakthrough in your life and want someone to journey with you, I would love to help. If you want more information on the packages that I offer, please don't hesitate to reach out at roaringhopecoach@gmail.com. I'm going to say that again, roaringhopecoach@gmail.com. Hey, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this podcast, hit subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your friends and family. Always remember, your voice matters. Your dreams are worth pursuing. And you, my friend, have the power to roar out loud.